How can we make our infrastructure more sustainable? Sustainable infrastructure is critical for long-term success. But what exactly is sustainable infrastructure, and how can we achieve it? From green buildings to smart grids, sustainable infrastructure is essential for a sustainable future. Sustainable infrastructure is critical to the long-term success of any city or town. It is the foundation upon which all other development rests. And yet, sustainable infrastructure is often overlooked or neglected in favor of more flashy or exciting projects. This is a mistake. Sustainable infrastructure is the key to a vibrant, thriving community. It provides the basic services and amenities that everyone needs to live, work, and play. It is the backbone of any successful economy. There are many ways to make infrastructure more sustainable. One is to use materials that are durable and long-lasting. Another is to design for flexibility, so that infrastructure can be easily adapted to changing needs over time. And of course, sustainability also means making sure that infrastructure can be maintained and repaired in an environmentally responsible way. Sustainable infrastructure may not be the most glamorous part of city planning, but it is absolutely essential. Neglecting it will only lead to problems down the road. So let's make sustainable infrastructure a priority in our communities. It's the smart thing to do, and it's the right thing to do. Sustainable infrastructure is critical for the long-term health and prosperity of any community. By definition, sustainable infrastructure is a system of components that work together to support the economic, social, and environmental needs of a community. All three of these pillars are essential for a thriving community, and sustainable infrastructure ensures that they are all met in an efficient and effective manner. There are many benefits to sustainable infrastructure. First and foremost, it creates jobs and boosts the economy. In addition, it improves the quality of life for residents by providing safe and reliable transportation, clean water and air, and access to green space. Finally, sustainable infrastructure helps protect the environment by using less energy and resources than traditional methods, which reduces pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. Despite these clear advantages, some communities have been slow to adopt sustainable infrastructure due to the upfront costs associated with projects like retrofitting existing buildings or constructing new ones to meet green standards. However, these costs are generally offset by the long-term savings achieved through lower energy bills, reduced maintenance costs, increased property values, and other benefits. Moreover, sustainable infrastructure provides numerous co-benefits that extend beyond financial savings, such as improved public health from cleaner air and water or increased social cohesion from vibrant public spaces. Saudi Arabia has announced a $1 trillion pipeline of infrastructure projects aimed at diversifying the economy beyond oil and positioning the kingdom as a global hub for investment and logistics. The development agenda has created opportunities in a range of new areas such as smart cities, tourism, and clean energy. Saudi's Vision 2030, a roadmap drawn up by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, was launched to develop the kingdom's strategic position, investment power, and place at the center of the Arab world and the region. Saudi Arabia will invest 40 billion riyals, $10.6 billion, in developing local infrastructure projects in 11 cities. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, KSA, is witnessing an unprecedented boom in construction and urban mega projects that will reshape the future of the kingdom and the region. Mega public and private sector projects, funded by the Public Investment Fund, the royal commissions responsible for the prime urban areas, the related ministries, and the private sector are driving a large number of projects and opportunities. The KSA market is experiencing a robust post-COVID recovery, with projects valued at more than $1.70 trillion under planning. Saudi Arabia ranks as the single largest economy in the Middle East and North Africa, MENA, region, and the 19th largest globally, and is the only G20 member country in the region. The Qiddiya project, located 4 to 5 km west of Riyadh, is being developed as a city for entertainment, sports, and arts, and also has a completion date of 2022 for the first phase, with initial infrastructure costs of USD 8 billion. The project needs additional investments to reach its goal of 17 million visitors per year by 2035. Amala, a USD 3 billion luxury wellness tourism project, planned for construction near Neom, and the Red Sea project in the Northwest region. For all these reasons, sustainable infrastructure should be a priority for all communities looking to create a bright future for themselves. It is evident that sustainable infrastructure is essential for the future of our planet. We must be proactive in our efforts to protect our environment and build a sustainable future. With the right planning and implementation, sustainable infrastructure can be a reality. Sustainable infrastructure is critical to the success of our economy and the well-being of our citizens. We must invest in sustainable infrastructure projects that will create jobs, spur economic growth, and protect our environment. I urge you to support sustainable infrastructure investment in your community. Thank you for your time.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله سعد الله أوقاتكم بكل خير حياكم الله. Welcome and good evening to this session about infrastructure in Saudi Arabia. We're going to talk about specifically sustainable infrastructure in Saudi Arabia. And we're going to have a brief introduction about what's happening in Saudi Arabia in terms of infrastructure projects and are they sustainable or not. And then I'm going to introduce our guest, Mr. Anthony Kane, who will take us through a brief introduction and discussion about the Envision Sustainable Infrastructure Rating System. So welcome to this session. We're going to talk about sustainable infrastructure in Saudi Arabia and introduction into Envision. Thank you for our host and sponsors, the Green Building Training Center and the Green Building Chapter of the Saudi Umran Society. Just some housekeeping rules. This session is going to be recorded and we can share the recording with you, inshallah, after the session within 24 to 48 hours of this recording. If you have any questions, just post them in the chat box in the Q&A section, and then we will discuss them, inshallah, after the session is over. Please keep yourself muted until the end of the session. And if you have a question you would like to speak, you would like to unmute yourself, just raise your hand and we will unmute you, inshallah, when your turn comes up. So let's begin with a brief introduction to the Green Building Training Center and who we are and what we represent. So just to introduce myself, my name is Dr. Mohammed. I'll be your host for tonight in this webinar, inshallah, and I'll be introducing my guests shortly. I'm a PhD holder from Queensland University of Technology in Sustainable and Green Building Architecture, US GBTC faculty since 2015, and I'm holder of different credentials, including the Lead AP and the Envision Sustainability Professional. Also, I pride myself of being a member of different organizations such as the US Green Building Council, the Umran Society, the International Sustainability Professional Society, and many more. So a brief introduction about the Green Building Training Center, which I'm proud to have established and have this webinar as the first webinar series as part of the Green Building Training Center. And I'm very honored and pleased that Anthony accepted the invitation to be my first guest in these series of webinars. So our motto in the Green Building Training Center basically is to reduce climate impacts by improving the built environment through education, training, and mentoring, developed by an inclusive and collaborative local and global networks. Our vision at the Green Building Training Center is to providing professional development and capacity building to all stakeholders on topics covering green buildings, sustainability, healthy and resilient buildings for all. Our core values basically can be classified or divided into 4 core values: the quality of life, best in class, lifelong learning, and collaborative approach. So in quality of life core value, it's proactively promoting a better and healthier built environment for a better quality of life within this generation. In terms of the core value of best in class, we have local and global influencers in all that we do in terms of education, mentorship, relationships, and customer service. For lifelong learning core value, our education programs support lifelong learning about the intersection between buildings, people, and our planet, the triple bottom line of sustainability. And in terms of the collaborative approaches, we foster collaborative approach to achieve global sustainability, health, and resilience goals. So now I'm going to give you a brief kind of snapshot on what's happening in terms of infrastructure and specifically sustainable infrastructure in Saudi Arabia. Basically, Saudi Arabia is in a booming phase in terms of construction and specifically for mega and giga projects. So Saudi Arabia will invest in 40 billion riyals, which is estimated at $10.6 billion in developing local infrastructure projects in basically 11 cities. This is just in 11 cities, but there's more projects that are coming in the pipeline. And KSA is witnessing an unprecedented boom in construction, urban and mega projects that will reshape the future of the kingdom and the region. Mega public and private sector projects are funded by the Public Investment Fund, the Royal Commissions responsible for the prime urban areas, the related ministries, and the private sector, and driving a large number of projects and opportunities in the region. Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's market in terms of infrastructure is experiencing a robust post-COVID recovery with projects valued at more than $1.7 trillion under planning and in the pipeline. And Saudi Arabia ranks as the single largest economy in the Middle East and North Africa, MENA region, and the 19th largest globally, and is the only G20 member country in the region. A few of the infrastructure projects that are in the pipeline are either under construction or almost finished or still in the design and planning phase. So we have the metro stations and the metro projects in Riyadh, for example. A Kingdom Tower, for example, in Jeddah, which is still under construction, one of the mega projects that are considered to be one of the projects that will adopt this concept in terms of application of sustainability. We have different projects like King Salman Park, which is going to be the largest park in the world that has application of sustainable infrastructure topics in it. Different projects in tourism, sustainable tourism, like what you see here in a diagrammatic illustration of the Amala project in the western side of Saudi Arabia. Of course, different projects are underway in different cities, as I said, in 11 cities. And quite recently, His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman has announced the Downtown Saudi Company, which will also deal with different infrastructure projects across different downtown areas and cities in the kingdom. And of course, as I said, some of the projects in terms of tourism, the Red Sea project, which is very critical in terms of approaching infrastructure and not really harming the environment and the ecosystem in the project itself. Entertainment sector, of course, is a big game changer in Saudi in particular and in the region. Al Qaddiya project, for example, is under construction at the moment and will enhance the infrastructure game in terms of application of sustainability. And in terms of heritage, we still have achieved the sustainable concept in heritage projects. For example, in Al Ula development, where the projects are specifically addressing heritage and the conservation of heritage and the culture and the value of those projects to be preserved within that environment and within that culture and heritage value. I'll stop here in terms of giving you kind of a brief snapshot of what's happening in Saudi Arabia. With that, I will introduce my guests. Of course, we are honored to have Anthony Kane, who is the president and CEO of the Institute for Sustainable Infrastructure in Washington, D.C., where he oversees the organization's overall operations and leads the development of the Envision framework for sustainable infrastructure. Kane also sits as a commissioner on the Washington, D.C. Commission on Climate Change and Resiliency. Anthony will be talking about the introduction to Envision, and the presentation will introduce the Envision, a holistic sustainability framework, and the rating that enables a thorough examination of the sustainability and resiliency of all types of infrastructure. It will include a brief introduction to its origins, the organization, and underlying concepts, as well as the benefits of using Envision and its current application in the industry. So I will hand it over to Anthony.
Well, thank you again, everyone, for joining. I'll just quickly pull up my slides and we can begin the presentation. In the meantime, while we're waiting for the slides, I can begin by just talking briefly about the history of our organization, the Institute for Sustainable Infrastructure. We were created in 2010 through a collaboration of 3 local engineering associations, the American Society of Civil Engineers, which represents all of the licensed engineers, individuals. Also, the American Public Works Association, which represents many of the infrastructure owners, both in the United States and in Canada. The American Public Works Association and the Canadian Public Works Association are the same institution. And then also the American Council of Engineering Companies. So this is an organization that represents many of the consultants in the engineering and infrastructure field. So those 3 organizations got together and created the Institute for Sustainable Infrastructure and still have representatives that sit on our board of directors. And they really saw the transformative effect that rating systems like LEED had had. Oh, and I see now I can pull up my slides. So excellent. Thank you, Dr. Elser.
No worries. Sorry for the delay.
Oh, no trouble. So great. Hopefully now everyone can see the start of the presentation. And I'll just... So as I was mentioning, we were created in 2010 through this collaboration, and they saw the transformative effect that rating systems like LEED had on the building and architecture industry, but recognized that LEED did not apply to many of the types of infrastructure projects that we heard about in the video, and that there were unique challenges and opportunities that infrastructure provided. And so while many of the sustainability concepts are the same, their application in infrastructure is unique. So they realized that we needed a common standard, a common framework or definition around what sustainability meant for infrastructure. And that was the task of ISI. So we really represent a hub for the community. Our membership includes over 290 AEC firms, 200 government agencies, essentially infrastructure owners, and 60 academic institutions. We were, before COVID, based in Washington, DC. We have since gone fully remote, but we operate largely throughout the United States and Canada with some international operations. So we'll be telling our story from that context, as I mentioned. So we partner in Canada with the Canadian Society for Civil Engineering. We also have operations in Italy, and I'm sorry it cut off here, but ICMQ, which is the Italian Construction Certification Organization there that applies Envision in Italy. And we've recently started a relationship with FEMCIC, the Mexican Federation of Civil Engineers, to help spread sustainable infrastructure and Envision throughout Mexico and Latin America. When we were creating Envision, we partnered with Harvard University and their Zofnass program for sustainable infrastructure. They were co-creators in the system. And now, just recently, I'm happy to announce as of this summer that the Zofnass research program has agreed to join ISI formally. So they're no longer at Harvard University, they're part of us full-time now as our research program. And really, whether it's Saudi Arabia, the United States, Canada, Mexico, Italy, we're all facing the same global challenges, especially in the case of infrastructure. We're looking at the impacts of climate change, the need for resilience, issues of equity and social justice, of environmental protection and biodiversity loss, issues of public health, especially after COVID, and the need for economic recovery. And when you look at all of those challenges, any one of them would be daunting. We have to address them all simultaneously. And also we know that the solution, in the solutions, infrastructure will play a critical role. Infrastructure can't solve all of these by itself. But again, as we heard in the video, it is the backbone of our economy. It's the backbone of strong communities. And infrastructure plays a critical role in every single one of these. So we have to look at sustainability in the context of the infrastructure development we're doing, especially now in a critical moment in history. Again, the video mentioned the massive investments that are happening in Saudi Arabia, but that is being mirrored all over the world. The United States recently passed large infrastructure investment bills. Canada did the same. There's the European Green New Deal. There's the China Belt and Road Initiative, huge investments around the world, trillions of dollars going to infrastructure development. And that will really set the trajectory of our planet for decades to come. So when we talk about what the world is going to be like in 2100, much of that infrastructure is in the pipeline now. We're going to be planning and designing and building it over the next 5 to 10 years. So again, critical. We're not like other industries, like products where you have another chance next year. You can make a new model, you can come out with a new tool. The turnover, the lifespan of infrastructure means we really only get one shot. And so Envision is a tool to help us implement sustainability. There's a great Peter Drucker quote that says, "You can't manage what you can't measure." And before, it was very hard to measure what is sustainability in the context of infrastructure, what's better, what's worse. When you're trying to balance, again, carbon emissions and biodiversity loss and stakeholder engagement, how do you find a way of putting those together and making judgments about what you do and what you can't do? Because we know that you can't do everything on every project. So Envision provides that blueprint for better infrastructure, and it enables that thorough examination of sustainability. It gives us a framework. I often talk about it in terms of being a common language that is so critical. Again, when you think of infrastructure, it involves so many different disciplines, so many different professionals, so many different companies and organizations that have to collaborate on a project, and so many years from the planning, design, construction, and operation. How do we find a common system that can carry through all of those differences, all of those expanses of time and differences in understanding? Envision is the tool that can really bring us all together to implement the best possible solutions. And as the last bullet mentions, drive better project management. And we'll talk about that as well. A unique aspect of Envision is that it applies to all different types of infrastructure. And as you can see, this isn't even a comprehensive list. This is just a sample set, but so many different types of infrastructure projects out there that represent the other half of our built environment, far beyond just buildings and architecture. And I'm sorry if you're seeing that Zoom bar. I'm hoping it'll go away in a moment. You'll be able to see the full slide. So again, the importance of having a tool that represents this half of our built environment, again, as the video mentioned, that's often overlooked and not quite as glamorous, but critical to what we do. So while there are great tools out there like BREEAM and LEED that apply to buildings, Envision is an important tool that can apply to all those other projects. Like those other systems, there are common components. There's the guidance manual, which is completely free on our website after you create a free account. We have a self-assessment tool, a pre-planning checklist that allows you in a very early phase, when you might not know all the details of a project, to assess how well you're addressing the different criteria. We have a professional training and credentialing program, the Envision Sustainability Professional, or ENVSP. As Dr. Al-Surf is a credential holder there. And we have our project verification and awards program, similar, where if you have a project that wants to use the framework, they can go through a third-party review and receive an award of either verified silver, gold, or platinum. I don't have enough time today to go into all the details and nuts and bolts of the system, but just to try to give you a brief highlight, there are 64 sustainability indicators across 5 categories. And those cover the full range of sustainability impacts in terms of quality of life, the social impacts, leadership, which looks at the collaboration, planning, and economy, the resource allocation, which is our efficiency in terms of materials, energy, and water, our natural world, which looks at our environmental impacts, and climate and resilience, which is both our contribution, our reduction of emissions that contribute to climate change, as well as our preparedness for climate change through resilience planning. As I mentioned, that unfolds into these 64 sustainability indicators. You probably can't read it, but this is just to show how the system unfolds. And I've highlighted there at the bottom, we also have a recognition for innovative things that might not be included in the Envision criteria, because we know that sustainability is about doing things differently, about the need to change. And there, I think it's particularly relevant to the work that's being done in Saudi Arabia, because you're really looking at the future and how to build really innovative, creative infrastructure systems for the future and to be an example for not only the MENA region, but for the rest of the world. And so I think some of the projects that you're working on in Saudi Arabia would be excellent candidates for this innovation category. Here quickly is how each of those credits look if you zoom in a little bit closer. An important element is that we don't just draw a line in the sand and say, you're either sustainable or not sustainable. We know that sustainability is a spectrum. We always want to be striving for more and greater sustainability. So we look at 5 different levels of achievement, and you can kind of see as you move from left to right, we're adding requirements, upping the requirements as you go along and achieving those higher levels. Important to note the 2 columns on the right, conserving and restorative. So conserving is kind of that net zero, no negative impact level. But then we go beyond that and say that infrastructure often has the opportunity to be restorative, to bring the environment back, to revive a flagging economy, to strengthen a community that's been previously damaged or hindered over time. So that's also an important element of infrastructure that differentiates it from just buildings, that we have this potential to be restorative in our communities, our economy, and the environment. I mentioned before, but I really think of Envision as this common language, and I'll say of the projects that go through that third-party review, a very common response and feedback that we get is that it's just a good project management tool. And that makes sense when you think about what sustainability is and its core principles. It's about thinking about the future. It's about anticipating challenges and addressing them early. It's about good, effective communication and stakeholder engagement early in the project. And it's about being efficient with our resources. So when you factor all that together, of course, a sustainability framework is just going to be a better way of delivering our projects. There are numerous benefits that come out of that. More innovation, fewer conflicts and challenges, change orders and things like that at a project because of that early communication. So while it might be a little bit more of an investment in terms of time and effort early on, I really feel like that pays dividends later in the project by just delivering a higher quality project and, again, less conflicts. So this is just a quick map of the distribution of Envision use. We don't necessarily advocate that every project needs to go through the third-party review. So there are far more projects using Envision in a kind of informal way than we track, but this is what we have data on through our third-party verification program. So 135 verified projects, $130 billion US in terms of their impact. We have over 6,500 active credentialed professionals, and again, 200 public agencies. So as you can see, much of the application is throughout the United States and Canada. However, you can also see that cluster in Italy. And I've highlighted there, we do have a project that in 2019 used Envision in the kingdom. And so we're very excited about that. So there is an example in the region. So now quickly, I'll go through just some of the ways that we're seeing Envision used at different levels. So it's a project tool, but it's starting to influence the entire industry at all levels. So I want to respect our time because I do want to make sure we have plenty of time for discussion. So I'll probably try to go relatively quickly through this section, but just to give you a quick overview of what we're seeing. So in Canada, the federal government actually requires that all federally funded infrastructure conduct a climate change resilience assessment. And Envision is one of the 2 methodologies that's accepted for conducting that assessment. So there, it's a great example of how federal government that wants to set ambitious goals can lean on industry developed standards and frameworks so that it's not the government deciding how do you do a climate assessment. It's the infrastructure industry, the engineering community that's deciding this is how we do these are the requirements that we need. And then the government and regulatory bodies are just leaning on those. We also see it at the state level. So in California, they recently passed a bill that would streamline the permitting and review process for environmental transit projects. This is important. I know it's different in other countries around the world, but one challenge that we see in many countries is the long timeline for permitting and reviewing projects, especially infrastructure projects, that can be a hindrance. And so those regulatory limits are important to protect our environment and our communities. But at the same time, we know that we have a massive need for infrastructure investment and a short window to build those projects. And so using Envision as a screening tool to expedite projects based off of their sustainability outcomes is a great way of addressing that. We see it at the local government level as well. So some cities like Miami-Dade or Los Angeles are requiring Envision or adopting Envision formally. Here, I think the example is there are many cities and communities around the world that have adopted building rating systems like LEED or BREEAM, requirements for those. And Envision now is a great way to fit into those existing ordinances or building standards that, yes, while we want sustainable buildings, we also want the other half of our built environment, our infrastructure, to be sustainable as well. And we can lean on Envision in the same way that we lean on those building rating systems. And then we see it at the project level. And this can take many forms. So again, with credential holders, sometimes we see requests for proposals that come out that ask for credentialed professionals to be involved in the project. Sometimes the proposals or the contracts require that the credentialed person conduct a self-assessment, and then the owner makes the decision whether they want to go through the third-party review or not. And then sometimes, especially if they're a seasoned Envision user, the owners will require that consultants not only have trained professionals, that they conduct the assessment and put the project through third-party verification. So we see it at many different levels. And we see it at the portfolio level. I apologize for all the acronyms. This is the New York City Department of Design and Construction, the entity that oversees all of the public construction in New York City. And so for their infrastructure projects, they conducted an assessment of the different typologies that they do and their existing sustainability goals and standards, and then looked at how a tool like Envision could identify the gaps. So here what you're looking at is the 5 different categories of Envision. And in white, you have where the city's baseline sustainability policies and requirements would meet the Envision requirements. And then they looked at, in green, yellow, and red, where they could improve their performance based off of level of effort. So green would be the least effort, red would be the most effort. And so this is a great example of many places already have some sustainability goals, but they can benchmark themselves and do a gap analysis on how it compares to the requirements in Envision. Because I know, for example, on many of the projects in the kingdom, there are very ambitious sustainability goals. Again, as we saw in the video, a lot of work being done in clean energy, a lot of work being done in sustainable communities, protecting the environment of the Red Sea. So there's a lot that's already underway, but tools like Envision can also be a good benchmark for that. So here you can see the outcome of this study was that the city was doing very well in terms of the quality of life and the social impacts, but they weren't doing very much in terms of climate change and resilience planning. And that would be the most beneficial area to target their efforts to improve. We also see Envision working its way into design guidelines. So as Envision becomes a more widely adopted tool, cities and authorities building that into their specification and design guidelines, the requirements of Envision. So they just inherently meet those requirements. Here, I'll just talk briefly about the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, because this was a great example of an agency. They oversee all of the seaports and airports of New York City, multi-billion-dollar US agency. And they already had a sustainability guideline, and that was developed before Envision existed. So it had been around for over 10 years. But a few years ago, they realized that they needed to update it. It was getting quite old and out of date. But rather than go through all of that effort, they decided to just scrap their system and adopt Envision. And when I asked them why they would do that, they said, well, it's quite a bit of effort for us to kind of develop our own customized tool and to constantly be updating it. And at the end of the day, all they ever had was their own guideline, which was kind of a manual that they would hand to their staff. And they said, by adopting Envision, we get the framework and all of those requirements for free. We get an organization that like ISI that's constantly reviewing and updating it based off of best practices. We get a training program, educational resources for our staff, and most importantly, they get to be part of this larger network. So when it was the Port Authority's customized tool, they couldn't really talk to anyone else because no one else was using their tool. But now they're part of a ports working group. They can communicate with other ports that are using Envision. They can share resources and accomplishments and strategies. And so it's really helping them to improve the work they do by being part of a larger network in a larger community. So again, just kind of briefly scanning some of the projects. This is the Ayal community development. This is the one in Saudi Arabia and South Iran. This was a master planning project. So again, as far as infrastructure, we have seen Envision applied to master plans. So this is not about each of the individual houses in the project, but about all of that other infrastructure that you see in the photo, the roads, the energy systems, water systems, sewer systems, waste removal, that all became part of this master plan community. And since we were talking about the many mega and giga projects going on in the kingdom, we do see Envision applied on larger scales. So this is a multi-billion-dollar project, the LaGuardia Airport replacement in New York City that received Envision Platinum in 2019, as well as the California High-Speed Rail. This is currently the largest infrastructure project in the United States at around $80 billion. I know that's dwarfed by some of the projects that are going on in Saudi Arabia, but for us, this is a large one, and comparable in terms of those community-wide impacts. And I would say Envision usually works very well in some of those large projects. There are challenges once you get up into the city scale application of Envision, but on large infrastructure systems, it's a great fit. And then again, even those challenges at the city scale can be worked through. They just require a bit of attention and a bit of extra effort. As you can imagine, anything that complex is going to require a little bit of extra effort. So with that, just some final thoughts, specifically on how Envision could be beneficial in Saudi Arabia. Again, if you're seeing this bar that I can't seem to get to go away, I apologize. So I think there is a huge value with aligning the work that's being done in Saudi Arabia with this internationally recognized framework. I know that it is a goal of the kingdom in making many of these infrastructure investments, not only to serve the need of Saudi Arabia, but to be an example to the region and the world, to utilize the resources and abilities at the kingdom's disposal to give a vision for how sustainable communities can be for the rest of the world. Challenges that, that many different communities around the world are facing, but don't have the resources to explore. I think there's a great way to do that. And I think using an international tool is a great way to convey that message in a way that other people could understand and easily adopt. Also, again, looking at the complexity of many of the projects that are going on in Saudi Arabia, massive urban infrastructure systems, entire new cities kind of springing up. Having a framework like that, like Envision, that can really help with those complex interconnected projects. And then they can really help with initiating that systemic change. As I mentioned, all the different ways that adoption of Envision as a project framework has impacted anything from national policies, state legislations, contracting, manufacturing, construction practices. These standardized frameworks have a great potential to implement systemic change, even at universities where they're now teaching Envision. And I think, again, the combination of a tool like Envision and the massive investments that are going on in Saudi Arabia, combined, those can provide the catalyst for that change, right? So the infrastructure investments that you're making are significant enough to move the needle on, say, manufacturers. Who's going to provide all the materials for those large mega projects? And if there are sustainability requirements built into that, that's enough for those manufacturers to maybe change their disclosures, to change even maybe their manufacturing processes to be more sustainable. And understanding the trade-offs. As I mentioned, it's not possible to do everything, to solve every challenge on every project. And sustainability, unfortunately, requires making decisions on where you can have the greatest impact. Frameworks like Envision can really help with that. And I already mentioned the recognition for innovation, which again is at the heart of many of these projects in Saudi Arabia. You're not just kind of maintaining systems or trying to get to a good state of repair. You're trying to be innovative to create things that haven't been seen before anywhere else in the world. And so having a framework that can guide that can be really valuable. So that is, and I think I'm just perfect on time to allow plenty of time for discussion, but I do want to thank you for your time today and for, again, to our hosts for the opportunity to join you. I have my contact information here if you would like to reach out at any time.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you for your time. We took so much of your valuable time. It's an honor having you as guests in these series of webinars. I have just posted on the chat box if you guys want to have any connection regarding this topic, we can get it forward, inshallah. And for those of you who have registered for the webinar and would like to get an attendance certificate, please contact us later on for more information. Thank you very much, Anthony. I can't thank you enough for this opportunity. Any last comments or feedback?
I just want to say thank you to everyone who put in the questions. I'm always happy to stay to answer really wonderful questions. And thank you, Dr. Al-Surf and my host, the Green Building Training Center. Hopefully you'll invite me back sometime and we can continue the conversation.
Next time we'll be in person, inshallah.
Yes.
God willing. Thank you very much. Good evening and good night to you all, and good afternoon to you, Anthony.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.